Hello, my name is Natalia Kasany, and today I would like to talk to you about the family of SQL standards. So, what is SQL? SQL, pronounced SQL or SQL, stands for Structured Query Language. It is typically used in relational database management systems to query, manipulate, define, or control access to data. SQL was created in the 1970s in the United States and became an international standard in 1987. It is now an industry-accepted standard, and numerous organizations strive to comply with it. It is constantly being revised and augmented to address the evolving needs of data processing organizations. Now that SQL has become an international standard, it is maintained and further developed by the Technical Standardization Subcommittee, ISO IEC GTC1 SC32, Data Management and Interchange. The family of SQL standards is composed of three standards series. ISO IEC 1975, entitled Information Technology, Database Languages, SQL. ISO IEC 19075, containing guidance for the use of database language SQL. And ISO IEC 13249 for SQL multimedia and application packages. Now let us explore in more details each of these series. The ISO IEC 9075 series is the main series out of three that actually defines the language. It specifies the grammar of SQL and the result of processing statements in that language by an SQL implementation. The series is composed of 10 parts from 1 to 15. Some parts have been withdrawn and replaced by more up-to-date content, integrated in the new parts. This is why the numbering of the parts is not sequential. The first part, ISO IEC 9075-1 Framework, as the name suggests, describes the conceptual framework and defines terms and notations used in the other parts of ISO IEC 9075 series. It is being updated to take into account the latest published part related to the processing of multidimensional arrays and other new parts. The second part, ISO IEC 9075-2 Foundation, is the main part of the series. It defines the data structures and basic operations on SQL data. It provides functional capabilities for creating, accessing, maintaining, controlling, and protecting SQL data. This second part specifies the syntax and semantics of a database language. For example, for specifying and modifying the structure of SQL data, for declaring and invoking operations on SQL data, for declaring database language procedures, to improve dynamic preparation and execution of SQL statements, and so on. The specifications provided in this part allow for the compatibility between SQL implementations. Published in 2016, it was revised in 2019 in order to include corrections and updates, for example, for the statements related to access control. Other parts contain complementary rules for specific manipulations. For example, Part 9 defines extensions to SQL to support management of external data through the use of foreign data wrappers and data link types. Part 14 defines ways in which SQL can be used in conjunction with XML. And Part 15 defines the means to work with particular data structures, such as multidimensional arrays or matrices in SQL. All these parts, aside from Part 15, that was published in 2019, were published in 2016. They were then updated and corrected in 2019 in order to describe new features. The whole series is currently being revised and will be updated if necessary. ISO IEC 9075 series is accompanied by ISO IEC 19075, providing guidance for the use of database language SQL. The guidance includes the justification and the explanation of some SQL features, giving examples where appropriate. Currently, the series counts 9 standards that cover the usage of fixed query regular expressions in SQL in Part 1, the usage for time-related information, such as, for example, time-related data types and predicates, in Part 2. The use of SQL expressions and statements within programs written in Java programming language in Part 3, and conversely, the use of routines and types written in Java within SQL expressions and statements in Part 4. Part 5 provides syntax and semantics for recognizing patterns in rows of a table, as defined in SQL Foundation Standard. And Part 6 describes how SQL supports JavaScript object notation, JSON, including storing, publishing, and querying of JSON data. Part 7 describes the use of polymorphic table functions. Their parameters and function return value can be tables whose shape is not known until query time. Part 8 describes the support in SQL for multidimensional arrays. Finally, Part 9 describes syntax and semantics for online analytic processing capabilities in SQL, including, for example, lead and lag functions on nested Windows functions. Finally, there is also the ISO IEC 13249 series that defines a number of packages of generic data types common to various kinds of data used in multimedia and application areas to enable the data to be stored and manipulated in an SQL database. It covers packages such as full text, spatial, still image, and data mining. The Subcommittee 32 continues to monitor the ever-changing state of the database industry to identify new features for the next generation of the SQL standards. They consider the new areas such as SQL for streaming data and property graph data. To this end, the committee initiated a new part in 1975 series, Part 16, to define ways for the SQL language to represent property graphs and to interact with them. In addition, the committee wants to define a common, standardized query language for the property graphs, which is currently missing. This standard would support graph-specific data types such as vertices, edges, and paths. It will target the creation, combination, and manipulation of graphs, making graph query language able to deal with graphs in the same way that SQL can deal with tables. To give you a hint of other developments related to the query language, a proposal for a new international standard for advanced analytics in data management is being discussed. This proposal aims at specifying multiple libraries of functions for statistical purpose, other non-statistical mathematical calculations, and complex calculations involving non-numeric data that are required to provide computation support to both SQL applications and graph query language applications. All published SQL standards can be consulted free of charge via one of the 9 reading stations put in place in Luxembourg. They are available in read-only mode with no obligation of buying. The reading stations are spread across the country, in the south, center, and the city of Echternach to facilitate access to them. The published SQL standards can be purchased via the ILNAS eShop. You can find them among other national, European, and international standards in PDF format with single user or multiple user license. There is also a possibility to contribute to the development of SQL standards, for example, to describe the new features. As mentioned before, the SQL series is maintained and further developed by a technical subcommittee, ISO IEC GTC1 SC32 Data Management and Interchange. So, in order to contribute to this series, you need to register as an expert in a national Miro committee, through which you will be then able to participate in the work of SC32. For your information, ILNAS, the national standards body of Luxembourg, proposes a free registration to all its national stakeholders. The registration can be done by means of a registration form available on ILNAS website. Please note that the world of standards is big and there are many other technical committees and standards in Europe and in the world to which you can contribute. We have reached the end of this presentation. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding the presentation, the use of consultation or purchase of the standards, I'll be happy to answer them. You have here my contact details. It would also be great to hear from you if you have ideas about the updates of SQL family of standards. Finally, I will also be your contact point if you're interested in standardization activities for other ICT topics, such as AI, health informatics, financial services, and so on. Thanks for your attention. I look forward to hearing from you.